Good morning. This is Travis Marker. I'm an attorney with Marker Law Mediation. I'm also involved with Stewart Growth, and in part of my excitement with being with part of Stewart Growth is being able to do some of these workshops. And today we have America Francis joining on the sidelines, and we have Lisa Wayment, who has her own business and is also helping Stewart Growth and some of our startup companies with network marketing, social media, logos, websites. So we're grateful to have her. We have Jacob Cannon, who has some entrepreneurial experience as well as an interest in I'm going to call horticulture, like botany, and animals, and very eclectic ways of looking at self-sustaining ideas, self-sufficiency. So glad to have him here. Um, some of the things I think we'll talk about today, since we have Lisa here, who's kind of an expert on this, right, Lisa? You're an expert.
I'm
Is
always learning and I'm always growing. So
Yeah, that's
I
awesome.
enough to
But
be dangerous.
yes, but one of the things that you definitely have some insight on is, as we're talking about how we start up a new business, the question is, how do we effectively get our message out? How do we effectively address kind of the traffic issues of how do we create lead generation? How do we manage lead generation? How do we get conversions? What type of marketing is effective? So maybe why don't you start with just some ideas on how a person, when they're starting a business, is thinking about how am I going to reach my audience?
I think that is probably one of the biggest questions is, so a lot of people come to me for website designs and I help them out a little bit with social media marketing and like getting on Google and things like that. But one of the biggest thing I always tell my clients is to be authentic with who you are, and your audience will somewhat organically start coming to you. I think a lot of that, some of that is, your strategic manifestation. Once you know what you want and the direction, once you start finding like-minded people, some of that starts happening naturally. Um, when it comes to leads, it really depends on what type of person you're looking towards. Like right now, I just built a website for someone who's going to help out hospitals. You're not going to find hospital, upper level hospital management like VPs and things like that on Facebook to help your cause. So then you'd probably need to go to like LinkedIn, and you would try to find different types of networks that would actually fit within the mold of what you're looking for. I work a lot with dog breeders, and that's a little bit of a different niche. You have to be careful on how you market some of that stuff and where you market it, because they can take it down and whatnot. And so really becoming authentic with your audience of who you are, why you're doing it. That's, I think, number one.
Okay, so let me ask some follow-up questions on that. That's great thoughts. So I really love the process of authenticity, because I think, as some people talk about, they avoid the pretender sense, problem, where they feel like they're not speaking to their audience, they're speaking to an audience that's actually not familiar to them, so they're faking, which makes it harder to get a conversion or a sale, because the people they're speaking to kind of have this sense that the pretender is out of their comfort zone, not just educationally, but just they don't feel like they belong in whatever they're marketing. So I really like the idea of authenticity, because at least you should feel comfortable with what you're doing, because it is hopefully something you can relate to. Um, I
Yeah.
I then like the idea of the audience, the appropriateness of the audience, where it sounds like you might have some forms of lead generation or referral generating activities that are organic, meaning they're referral based upon the groups that you associate with. But then it also sounds like you have to create another track, which is your online presence, that is not necessarily organic, but it still has to be connected to an authentic audience. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So a lot of the times, it's about presenting yourself to who you're marketing and being able to know it. And sometimes what's hard, even with what I do, A lot of people be like, oh, you build all these websites, you build over 100 websites, you should know this. It's like, no, necessarily, no, I shouldn't, because sometimes that's not what niches I've gotten into or what I don't know. That's where my education comes in. That's where, furthering knowledge and like getting help. And so a lot of the times I had to have a conversation with a client just this week where they're like, oh, you know how to do this, right? I was like, no, actually, I don't. So I could take on and like, some people worry about imposter syndrome and things like that. And it's like, you know what? I'm educated enough that I can do what I can do well. But if I don't, I'm never afraid to say, look, I'm willing to take on this challenge, but just know I don't have all the answers with this and it's going to take me more time. So if you're looking for someone to do it in X amount of time, I'm not your person, because this is going to take more back end education for me. And then I'll only charge you for the time that I'm working on it, but it could take me a little bit longer.
Okay, so
So
just maybe if I'm understanding, so even though you built 100 websites, some of the process is that you have to get to know your client well enough that you're building an authentic website to their paradigm, to their situation, which you have to invest in some of the context of their lives. Like, because they'll say, you should just know this. Well, when you say, I shouldn't just know this because I don't just know you, like, I have to get to know you so that we can then put this thing together. And
yeah. People
uh,
want me to like write huge things for them, like just be able to write about their business. And it's like, I can't. I don't know what your business. You're like, you get me a pamphlet and you want me to, create 5 pages off of, 20 little tabs. I don't know you enough. I don't know your business enough.
yeah, so that's a great point, is that when we're starting a business, we have to know our message enough that we can help create the content that service providers might need. But it has to be clear, it has to be authentic, but it can't be just assumed that somebody just knows.
Yeah. And I think sometimes we think because we see someone who has built something else that they would know, but what we don't. And so I think along a lot of the times we don't have clear messages for the people we're giving stuff to, and then we lose them. And so a lot of like what, especially with what I do, I have to ask a lot of questions, and I'd rather pretend that I know nothing and get all of my questions answered than I would pretend to know everything and disappoint someone every single time.
So I think you're totally correct. And I know even as a lawyer, that's one of the best things I do is I follow that same guidance of saying, well, what are you hoping that I can achieve for you? Because I'm not anticipating an outcome. I'm letting them tell me specifically their outcome. Sometimes I'm totally surprised, because some people, they come up with solutions that you're like, oh, I would not have even thought about that. And so sometimes it allows me to be taught and I learn from the client, but I also learn, if I'm trying to meet a person's needs, I need to first definitely listen to what their perspective is first, for sure.
Yeah. And find out if those needs can even be met with you. Because I mean, even as a lawyer, you have more clients in certain aspects, right? Like you do a lot of like marriage mediation and you do a lot of like things like that. But it's like if someone comes to you and they want something in a different realm or like property or something like that, maybe you could do it. But is that where your niche is? Is that where your money can be, or your time, or I don't know. I think for websites and things like that, I have to be careful because I can get into a lot of businesses, but then we can start building something. They'll be like, oh, well, I need this. And it's like, hey, well, that's completely different and out of my scope of what I know and what I do. So if you want me to learn it, I have to charge more. Or you could have gone to someone who already had those skills and could have done it in a more timely and effective manner.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah.
So Jake, as we've been listening, what are some of your thoughts about some of this as you, I guess, engaged in your businesses? How do you adopt some of these ideas?
Well, I actually learned the hard way with web design because I had two businesses in that before. and specifically not knowing the business that the people were working in, that my clients were wanting me to write all these articles about, like you were saying, Lisa. I went in there acting all hotshot, and yeah, failed hard. But like the imposter syndrome is real with this new business I'm trying to get up and going, the nonprofit. And uh it's rather refreshing to know that I don't have to know everything.
Yeah, that's definitely true. So maybe elaborate on why you find yourself in the imposter syndrome, and what are you confronting that is making you feel like you're in the imposter side?
Specifically forming a nonprofit. Like I have literally no idea how to do that. And I'm looking for board of directors, but I don't know what would be the best people for
Hey
that.
guys, let's go. Grab the towel.
So and Jake, you don't necessarily have to recreate you don't really have to recreate a nonprofit because Stewart Growth is made to be a nonprofit incubator. So
Yeah.
what we do is we bring you inside our model, and that way
Thank you.
you wouldn't have to you don't have to recreate your own board and everything. Our board could advise you as well as our system can adopt you, and we already have the 501(c)(3) status, so we're able to help kind of bring in other nonprofits, and we just treat it as departments, and then we help you develop your model under our umbrella if you want. So some of that we can help solve for you. Um, what so my impression of what your comments were is that the imposter syndrome is that you're just starting something that you've never started before, and that just feels uncomfortable. Is
Yeah,
that
yeah, that's a very succinct way to put it.
Yeah, and I think that's a little bit different than maybe being an imposter, because sometimes there's people who open up a bakery shop who've never like made a cookie, right? Like that's very different, because you're like you're completely pretending, where maybe everything you're doing inside your nonprofit by way of the services you're hoping to provide, you've done before. You just have never done it in exactly the same way. So you're struggling to maybe be prepared and just create up your infrastructure. But that doesn't necessarily mean you're an imposter. That just means that you're just learning.
Yeah,
I've been in situations where I have kind of bluffed, and I think that if we're bluffing, then I think that's definitely in the imposter category, because at some point, somebody will call your bluff, and you're gonna go, "Yep, I have no idea what I'm doing," and that could be very awkward, because if you've charged somebody money for something you don't actually know how to do, that has its own consequences and ramifications. But the first thing that hits is your integrity, because now you're just a liar. And so I think, coming back to what Lisa's saying about authenticity, at least if you're coming at it straightforward and saying, this is a new business, I'm just starting, I've always had a passion for this thing, but I'm learning, at least you're being upfront with people that you're in like the initial phase, and so they have less of an expectation that if you put on your website, I've been doing it, 1,000 years, and I got a billion websites. They're like, well, this hopefully should not have a super large learning curve, versus if you're just pretending something that you've never done, right?
yeah.
So with your nonprofit, who is your audience?
The mission is to feed as many people in Weber County as possible. For the aquaponics center to produce half of its produce going to the Utah Food Bank, the other half being sold to the public to keep the lights on. And just anybody in Weber County is really the target demographic.
Okay, and is there a reason why you've isolated it to just that demographic?
That's the pilot program. I've been talking with a number of people and the number of different food banks that also want the program in their county, but there's not multiples of me, so I need to focus here where I am.
Okay, yeah, that's super good. So because when I set up Stewart Growth, I specifically said there'd be no geographical area, so I could kind of just see where things sprout. And then we could see where, because sometimes it just depends on where people have interest and passion. So some of the things that you're doing relate to your model. So when we talk about business startup, you've definitely taken the correct step in identifying your audience, identifying your geographical area. It's something that you can actually match that relates to your ability to perform the service. It's definitely relating apparently to a passion. So that goes along with what Lisa's saying about being authentic. And having a pilot program is definitely good. Some of the things you'll be thinking about is, well, how do I scale it? How do I, because if you become the person who has to exist in order for your thing to work, that's not actually going to work, right? Like
No.
you have to set it up so that the thing has longevity, so the thing has perpetuality, and you want to be able to get people involved that you trust so that it works out.
Yeah.
Another thing that we add value to other nonprofits is we're working with interns at Utah Valley University as well as Weber State University, and these interns are able to kind of help pick up projects connected to their passions. And so, knowing about your nonprofit and what it might need, we can help in some of that startup as well. So some of the product that you're developing is not going to necessarily take a lot of marketing by way of who you're going to reach because you already have food banks in mind, but you will need to be able to communicate to the audience, i.e. the community that surrounds your business and these food banks, that you're providing this service. So we're going to turn the time back over to Lisa. How would you address that, Lisa? How would you like how what's the way he should shape the message so that his food is going to the food bank, but people also want to buy it to help sustain his model?
So there's a lot of different ways, and something that's just kind of come in mind that actually I got information about this week is there's a lot of things that you could do, especially in relation to like subscriptions, like having like something set up to where people could, like whatever you have that week that's available, people could come and they could spend a certain dollar amount and then they get one of everything, or they get like 2 cucumbers, 1 broccoli, something like that. You could almost set it up as if it was like, I can't remember the name of the company that used to, like, I used to go for like fresh produce. I would go and I would pay something on a website, and then I would go there and I would get like whatever extra produce they had that week, and it would be like a box. I
Yeah,
would come and I would pick up my box and
yeah, I think we did that also. It was like $25 and you just showed up and you got a box. Like you didn't necessarily get to pick everything, but they'd kind of already gone through it and you got a box. But yeah, it was super reasonable because you couldn't buy that much produce at the store for $25.
and there is another program that's going on kind of like that right now, but it's $5 and then they get extras of like different products all around. And then you could get like a bag of chips, you get a head of broccoli, you get 2 cucumbers, but you could do something somewhat like that to make it, I think it would be really lucrative because
Yeah.
everyone is wanting fresh produce at a reasonable price. But if you can set it up to where you can kind of say, okay, I have this many or X amount of people, and then you set up something out there online for people to go, or if you can just say first come, first serve, and then you charge people until the stuff is gone.
Yeah, I know there's something like that happens out in North Ogden with the I don't know if it's a food bank or something, but man, there's some day that I think they give out free bread, or it's pretty free bread, and there's cars down the street in North Ogden, just like these people, and they get like wheelbarrows and like not wheelbarrows, those little red wagons, and full of food.
Bountiful baskets. That's what I was. That's what I
Oh.
was thinking. Like bountiful baskets.
I need to note that down.
Maybe it wasn't $25. Was it $5?
Bountiful baskets were more than $5, but there is something right now that's going around. I'm trying to pull it up on my phone.
Yeah. So
And
Jacob,
it's an exchange. You pay
okay.
$5 and then they give you products. I'm trying to find out what it is so you can kind of look and see what they've implemented. But there's programs out there like that, and it's like maybe you work with them or maybe you just do your own thing. But finding a way that you continuously have every week customers coming back for what you're doing would probably be the most beneficial way to get your
Yeah.
donations in order to keep, like you said, the lights on.
So also, um, we've just recently partnered with Kate Bado, who has a grant writing business, and
Oh,
where you're kind of doing urban gardening, like self-sufficiency and feeding the food bank. Like I'm sure that you would fall into the category that we could potentially help you qualify for grants that would also help keep the lights on. But I'm also thinking in terms of your marketing and messaging, and Lisa can chime in on this. You would want to be creating like Instagram and I would say definitely Instagram where you'd have reels and you'd have posts that relate to your product, that it looks good, but also that you're giving it to the food bank, Catholic Community Services, uh, and you want stories, right? You want people
yeah.
to share stories about the value, the quality, like the surprising easiness of it, so that you can connect. That way, you're helping people. You could, because then you can accept donations, and people like you. This is why they're donating, is because you're feeding people. I know that sometimes people do things like flow charts that show this is how many pounds of food I've given in the last year. So you have kind of an accountability about how much poundage of food was donated, and and things of that nature. What are
Well,
your, what are your thoughts on that, Lisa?
Yeah, I think that's good. I think you should come up with your own motto though. Like your catchphrase of what it is so that people understand why you're doing it. So I think, first off, you need to decide, there's a reason you're doing this. Now it's sharing your purpose. So what is your purpose or your motto that you're going to push out there as your main basis of your platform? And from there you build on that.
oh, I've already got that.
All right, what is
I'm
it?
feeding everyone we can. That's for the slogan. I've written more than half of the business plan already. I didn't realize Stewart Growth would be able to be helping me this much, but the whole thing I've come up with is living water aquaponics, and also doing half half to the food banks and all that, but out of that also including soup kitchen, like a little pop-up soup kitchen made from the ingredients that were grown, or other ingredients that were gotten from other food banks. And that would be perfect for the stories. I wrote that into the business plan for social media kind of presence there.
So tell us more about aquaponics. How do you create the food?
Okay, so aquaponics is where you rely on the ammonia that's breathed out through the fish's gills. It's not their poo. A lot of people have that misconception. But the ammonia gets turned into nitrate via one bacteria culture, and then nitrate, which is plant available food, via another bacteria culture. The plants then filter that nitrates out, and voila, the water gets pumped back to the fish, and it's all good. You just have to make sure the fish are stay aerated, and you can raise fish and plants of all kinds of varieties that way. I have a theory that I can grow pineapples pretty well via this method.
Okay, so tell me, so how do you set up your model? So you have a gigantic fish tank somewhere, and then you're pumping water out to a field, or what? Like, how are you doing this?
Well, you have, yes, the giant fish tank, but then you pump that water to different tables. The When you use aquaponics or hydroponics even, you use 90% less water than traditional agricultural methods, because it's all just closed system, and you're just worrying about the evaporation that occasionally happens. Well, always happens, but not that much.
So,
Um,
So how many fish do you need per acre of land, or like what's this, like how big's your garden? Like what is the how how, how many fish do you need in order to grow a garden? Or
For a single greenhouse that is 160 yards wide by 20 yards, or 160 yards long, 20 yards wide, um I'm estimating around 100 fish for that much.
you have
And
it's a football and a half field
yeah.
long, and then 20 yards, so then a half a football field across. And where is this? Like you already have this place?
No, I've done all the math and the layouts, and I've actually 3D modeled what would have to be there, and everything. Like I said,
So do you
I've
is your initial startup going to be that big, or are you have you already started on a more micro level?
the initial startup I was aiming for was going to be 2 to 4 acres. Not super big, but also not very small at all. But that would be enough to feed 1,000 people indefinitely in Weber County, 4 acres.
And do you already have the land, or do you?
I do not. I'm like I am broke. I am very broke.
Okay, so you're definitely still at kind of just research and development phase, looking for some of your equipment and resources. So what would be a way that you could scale it down so that it was maybe your model could be set up in somebody's backyard? Or I mean, like, is that like have you done any beta testing on this model? Like, do you have you started it somewhere, like your parents' house or your house, or
I've got most of the equipment for my place. I just need to get uh the media that the plants would grow in. So expanded clay pebbles, or polyurethane open cell foam, which is the best because you can reuse it.
okay. Another idea that's coming to me, Lisa, I don't know your thoughts on this is since you're at the very development phase, like the initial phase, you could start making videos of your process. So like it's kind of like a video documentary of your process of, starting like little micro beds and little areas, smaller areas,
Mhm.
and you're putting those on a YouTube channel. As soon as your YouTube channel exists a month and you have 1,000 views, no, that's not correct. I think you have to have 10,000 views, but then you have to have one video that has 1,000 views. Then you can start making money on your YouTube channel. So that's another avenue source of income that you can create just in your startup process. So you might have some beta videos that say, this is me starting the process. This is the hydroponics concept. This is where we see stuff breaking down. This is how it's working. But it can be very educational based. Um,
Yeah.
because if you don't, I mean, if it's not necessarily a trade secret or intellectual property and it's a bit more wiki in nature, then people could help start it wherever you want it to go. Or you could kind of brand the idea saying that you'd help people start their models, because like places like Nebraska, they have plenty of land, right?
Yeah.
So so maybe I would say finding 2 to 3 acres, 4 acres in Ogden, Weber County is going to probably be pretty close to zero, just because it's people are putting houses on it right now, or apartment buildings.
Yeah. Well,
but
I
but if
was eyeballing Hooper or Far West.
which still could be subject to apartment buildings or houses,
Yeah.
just because we have such a housing
And the
issue.
cost of what you're going to spend for that 2 to 4 acres is going to be quite a bit.
Yeah.
But there definitely could be places where you're talking about water efficiency, like which could be central Utah, Vernal, southern Utah. But I'm thinking anywhere like Wyoming, Idaho, like places that are somewhat already agricultural based and water efficiency based. It doesn't mean you still couldn't serve the population with a certain food, but you might have more access to the acreage or the resources that you might want to facilitate the development of your model.
Okay.
But I think starting videos connected to what you're doing could be super exciting.
That was a little bit of the plan already too.
Yeah. So, Lisa, have you set up a YouTube channel? Like, is that model familiar with you?
I have done that. I've done it for my husband's business and for one or two others.
And did I say the formula correctly? It's a month and 10,000 views and 1,000 views on one video, and then they start to attach marketing to it?
I've never had to look at it for a benefit of actually making money.
Okay.
So I don't have that information. I can look it up and get it to you guys, but I don't have that off my head, top of my
I know
head.
if you set up a Google AdSense account and your channel starts to do that, that was my impression as I looked that up for a client one time. So I think these are all like super fun. I love the idea of working inside your passion with food and then coming up with a really unique technology to help grow food. I mean, that sounds really cool. I know that part by itself could be really interesting. Some of the things you could also do is potentially do pilots with some of the programs out at the high schools. Like I know that Weber High has a greenhouse. I know that
Fremont,
Fremont
Fremont has an aquaculture that they're thinking of turning into an aquaponics.
okay. So if you could get into some of their models via the nonprofit avenue, meaning that it's an educational based system that could help you. And because could be at the school might be able to help fund some of your startup process.
That'd actually be cool to get into the high schools and get into like the agricultural department and then have them help support your picture. That's a great idea.
I actually am going to be emailing the agricultural teacher of Fremont later today. So yeah, I'll bring that up.
Yeah. So do you have a greenhouse that is working under this model already?
Uh, no, but I can show you my garden here in my studio.
Well, I'm just,
It's
how do you,
literally on my wall.
yeah, no problem. I guess what I'm asking is, you've seen this work, or you're fairly, is this kind of theoretical for you?
At this moment, it is fairly theoretical. I've seen plenty of videos and like different things like that, explaining it and showing off the results. I have yet to see an aquaponics system myself. I'm going to be building one here in a few months.
So one part of what you could do by way of diversifying your product is that while you're developing and finding ways to actually get the aquaponics going, I know that urban gardening is super huge. So, I mean, if you have a garden already or something like that, some of what you're developing by way of creating a clientele, it could be like a gardening consulting process where if somebody wants to start a garden, you're working on like the hanging vines, or you're working on other ways, because maybe you don't have to necessarily set your garden up with aquaponics per se, but maybe you use the aquaponics water from another facility. Like maybe there's other ways to create at least the water system, so that you're also creating a product maybe somewhere else that is helping fund people's gardens on a more self-sufficient basis. Because it sounds like you're not using traditional soils. So the fact that you're using, you know, pebbles, clay pebbles and stuff like that, that maybe that doesn't require as much space as like maybe traditional soil, or as much maintenance as traditional soil. Or are you saying
You
it's more?
got it. You got it. You nailed it on the head.
Yeah. So if you're able to create a more efficient way to garden in less space and with something that needs less maintenance, maybe there's other ways that could be built upon without, let's say, the whole model being on the scale that you're talking about, right? It's how can you break it down to be something that maybe is a little bit more user friendly for every home potentially. So it looks like Lisa found the formula.
Oh.
Yeah, if you go out here, it talks about the views and you can actually, if you scroll down a little bit, it has like a calculator. So all you have to do is go back and forth with the numbers of views per day or whatnot, and then it tells you the amount you earn and projected yearly with that.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Daily, monthly, and yearly.
Okay.
Another thing that I notice about the YouTube process is that subscribers doesn't necessarily equal views. So like I noticed that some people might have 1 million subscribers, but if you look at the formula, they're making like 70,000 a month. So that tells you that the conversion is less than, maybe 7% potentially by way of like monthly conversions or something of that nature. I'm just spitballing the math there.
Yeah.
But as you kind of build upon what Lisa's saying about authenticity and aligning with your community, some of what you're doing is you're just trying to find the supporters who are willing to engage in your channel so that then you get the views, so that the views are like that. That's what helps you kind of propel your site, is the views plus having more people kind of super interested in your product
Yeah.
and your stories. And I guess that's what I'm saying about, like, if you have a bunch of little urban gardens that are building on aquaponics concepts, that now you have a lot more stories that you can share because you'll have more areas in which you can create content, but you're also engaging more of your audience in the experience. And now they are going to reference their networks and their people to kind of help develop your model.
And what would be cool is having them share, like whether you meet with them weekly, monthly, or whenever you talk with them, record some of those conversations, because then what the key points of what they're learning from it is something that you could put out there and say, hey, look, I had this cool conversation and we learned something new with what we're trying to do. And this is the conversation, and you talk about it. And then you're engaging everyone else who's also helping you do your little mock-up. Or even if you went out and just reached out to people and just said, hey, I want to build this and I don't have the space, so who's willing to engage in an adventure with me? This is kind of the cost associated to it and moving forward.
Yeah. That's the way to approach it. That's a good idea. Leah.
So this is why I love these groups, is because, like, it's super fun to have the collaborative approach to helping people, generate their ideas. We definitely believe in collaboration. I don't believe in competition. I believe that the way we ultimately build upon things is to feel like abundance, feel like there's definitely not, we don't live in a world of scarcity. And hopefully if we're all kind of focusing on doing things that benefit our community, even though they might be solo entrepreneurships or even solo adventures, I think ultimately the way we grow that business or that structure and idea is through collaboration. So I think it's been super great discussion today. Before we get ready to sign off, as we're close to the top of the hour, do we anybody else have any other thoughts they want to share or ideas?
Not from my end.
Anything else, Lisa? Closing wisdom?
No. not.
Okay. All right. Well, again, we do this once a month, so it'd be super exciting to see everybody again next month. It's not on a set date. It's usually, I guess, we are the second Tuesday. So anybody who wants to jump in.
Third Tuesday.
Yeah, sorry about that. Third Tuesday. We'd love to have everybody come in, collaborate, let's participate. Okay, we'll see everybody.
Bye.
Yeah.